Good evening and welcome to the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities Midweek Money Matters, where today we'll be talking about how much money we actually need for retirement. In all my years of outreach, this may be one of the most common questions that I get. And I think that you'll find that that question really is something that we all have to ask ourselves. But today, we're actually going to talk about these certain topics. We'll talk about whether there's this magic number that we need to strive for. We're going to talk about considering the circumstances that you have and what your plans are for your retirement. And finally, as always, I'll wrap it up with where can you go to get more information. Those of you who have participated in our Midweek Money Matters events in the past know that these sessions are 30 minutes long, so we get as much information as we can about the specific topic, but I think it's so important to provide additional resources because the reality is we could talk about these things for hours. So it's important that I provide you with the tools so that you can learn more on your own. Before we go any further, I do want to let you know that we will be sending out a Survey Monkey survey right at around 6:45 this evening. We're starting to put together our calendar for the months of May through August. So one of the questions we're asking is for ideas for future topics. So I would encourage you to keep an eye out for that and let me know the kinds of topics that you're looking for us to cover as we continue this program, Midweek Money Matters. So the sad truth, or the not so great truth, is that there really is no magic retirement formula. It is so dependent upon what your plans are, what my plans are, and each of us is going to have a different vision of what that's going to look like. So I don't want to discourage you, but the reality is I can't tell you that you need X amount of dollars. I can't tell you that you need 5 times your annual salary in order to live your retirement dreams for 20 years. There's a lot of different scenarios that we have to consider before we actually think about what that number looks like. So the first thing we kind of have to do is we have to think about how old are we planning to be when we retire. There are some people who want to retire when they're 55. There are others of us who think that we want to work as long as we possibly can, and we aren't planning to retire until maybe we're 70 or even older. We also have to stop to consider the lifestyle that we envision. When I talk to individuals about these types of things, the vision that people have is as different as night and day. My husband and I have very different ideas about what retirement's going to look like. I want to travel and do all the things that I've been putting off for some other day. My husband wants to spend time at home working in the garden and working out in his gym. So we have to actually take a step back because our two retirement visions are very different and they're going to require a completely different mindset when it comes to how much money we need. We also need to stop to think about whether or not we will want to work part-time. A lot of older adults, when they retire, aren't quite ready to stop working altogether, so they take on a part-time job or they pick up a hobby that where they're able to maybe sell some of their wares. And then the last thing you kind of want to think about is how long do you think that you're going to need to survive on that income? As time goes by, Americans are living longer and longer. So it used to be that when we thought about when we how long we would need to be prepared for, we often thought 15 years. But the reality is that we're living 20 and more years in our retirement. And if we have that plan, then we kind of need to be able to account for more money than we would have if maybe we think we won't live as long. Now, again, there's no magic formula for how long each of us is planning it will live, but we can take a look at our parents and our grandparents to see, you know, what their health was like and how long they lived into their retirement. And that can kind of give us an idea of what we need to plan for going forward. So I want to go back to what are we envisioning? There are a lot of individuals who plan to travel the world and take on all the things that they never got to do when they were younger. There are other people who want to stay home and just kind of relax and enjoy time in a garden or a craft or a hobby. Maybe they want to go golfing all the time. There are other people who plan to just be able to enjoy more time with their families. My in-laws, for instance, their goals were to retire and be able to spend as much time with the family and the people that were close to them as they possibly could. So that again is this whole different type of lifestyle. If you're planning to travel or have a hobby or spend more time with family or some combination of that, you're going to need different amounts of money on a regular basis to be able to plan for that retirement. So, depending on what your financial needs or plans are going to be once you retire, you may need anywhere between 70% of your total monthly income, or you may need even more, 90 or maybe even more than that of your monthly income. It really depends upon quite a few different things. But it's important that you recognize that you don't necessarily need that money sitting in an account somewhere. What you need to know is what kind of income you can count on when you retire that you can count on to have coming in on a regular basis. So I think that's really good news because we don't necessarily want to just have money sitting in a savings account somewhere, right? So it's important that we understand when we start to think about the money that we'll need for retirement, we need to take a step back and figure out, are we going to have Social Security? Do we have a pension? Have we been contributing to our 401k or 457s? If you didn't tune in to our presentation on the end of January, where we covered different types of retirement accounts, I would encourage you to check out our website, dobs.pa.gov. And if you go to our YouTube channel, all of our prior presentations for Midweek Money Matters are located there, and you can find them so that you can maybe catch up on some of the things that you missed to be able to answer some of those questions. So it's good news that we don't have to have that money sitting somewhere waiting for us. As you start to think about your income needs, you want to make sure that you consider all the sources of income, your Social Security, pension, and then if you have separate retirement accounts or investments accounts that you may have been putting into over the years, you may want to think about what that might look like for you, particularly once you hit that 72 and a half or 72 years old. You're going to be required to pull out at least a minimum amount according to the IRS rules and regulations. So make sure that when you start to think about that, once you get to those age brackets, make sure that you're remembering to speak to your tax professional or your accountant or your investment advisor or planner to make sure that you are remembering all of your income and the account balances that you may have. And then we have to kind of switch gears and we have to stop to think about what kind of expenses are we going to have? And this is where we really have a wide array of different answers because some of us may have no mortgage. Maybe we've already paid our house off, so we don't have to worry about a mortgage payment, but we are going to have to worry about taxes and insurance. Maybe your plan is to rent something, or you're going to continue to make a mortgage payment. That can be a big expense that we have to make sure that we account for when we compare our expenses to our income needs. We also want to think about some of our other debts, whether we've got personal loans, credit card debt, car loans, those types of things. We have to make sure that when we're thinking about what we're going to be spending every month, that we're considering those things. And finally, we have to stop to think about healthcare costs. That's a big one that a lot of us don't necessarily consider when we're thinking about retiring. As I was researching for today's session, I was really surprised to learn that Medicare actually can end up costing about 15% of our annual expenses. When you take into consideration the fees that you have to pay for Medicare, um, whatever part you're adding, then you've got deductibles and you've maybe got prescriptions or or vision or dental. Those types of things all really add up, and they can actually end up being, as I said, about 15% of our annual expenses. So that's really important that we keep in mind. And then we want to think about utilities. We still have to eat. And what are we going to do to entertain ourselves? That's where we have to really understand what our retirement life is going to look like. Are we going to travel? If that's the case, those expenses have to include our travel costs, and that can become very expensive. One of the things that I was reading while researching is that a lot of times we think about all of the other everyday expenses and we think we're okay. And then as soon as we retire, we take a 4 or 8 week trip that ends up costing us a whole lot more money than we had anticipated. And what happens is if we pull from investments or we aren't careful, we end up losing significant amounts of growth because of withdrawing those funds and not planning appropriately. So it's really important, as I've said, that we make sure that we really understand what our plans are for retirement. So here we go. Here we've got a couple who are taking an RV trip. I had an aunt and uncle who literally traveled all the states once they retired. Now, all of their housing expenses then were wrapped up in their RV, and they thoroughly enjoyed that retirement. But imagine if they hadn't accounted for that. That could have ended up causing an awful lot of financial strain had they not planned appropriately. Maybe you're really good at golfing, and not only do you want to golf more for your own pleasure, maybe you're going to want to offer some golf lessons. That can actually supplement some of your income, allowing you to do some of those other things that you want to do. So make sure, again, that you're taking into consideration these different items that we've talked about today. So while we, again, there's no magic number, like I said at the start of today's session. If you have little or no debt and you're lucky enough to have healthcare coverage from a pension or a retirement, and maybe you plan to cut expenses, because certainly we can probably do that, 70% of your monthly income may be enough if you are careful. If you don't expect your lifestyle to change a whole lot, so you still have a mortgage payment, you are still paying for insurance and prescriptions and all those types of things, 80% of your monthly income could be that magic number for you. It just depends on, again, what your plan is. So when we think about that 80%, we take into consideration less wear and tear on our vehicle. We aren't going to have to probably continue to buy work clothes and things of that nature. So we're going to be saving money in that sense. We also aren't going to be paying Social Security and unemployment insurance because we're not working anymore. So we're going to save that money as well. So that's where experts kind of come up with this 80% as the number that we need to consider replacing when we retire. If you have more debt, need to pay health insurance, or you really plan to do a lot of travel, or you plan to do a lot of really fun things that maybe you've been putting off, you may need 90% or more of your monthly income that you had earned when you were working. The good news is, though, there are a lot of calculators that you can find that will help you with planning that out. As the Department of Banking and Securities, I have to be very careful not to suggest that you go to any commercial sites. However, Kiplinger is a non-commercial publication that we rely heavily on to get information. Has a really cool retirement calculator. So if you go to www.kiplinger.com and in the search box type in retirement calculator, it will bring up a series of questions that you can answer. It will ask you questions like, what's your current and your spouse's current income? It will ask you if you have been paying into other accounts like 401ks or 457s or IRAs or different types of accounts of that nature. It will ask you if you've got a pension. It will ask you to check the Social Security Administration's website to find out at this point what your monthly Social Security payment is going to be. And what's really great is once you plug in all that information, it will tell you where you may be lacking and you may want to increase what you're putting away for retirement. I found that to be very helpful as I was putting today's presentation together and kind of taking a look at my own situation. Now, if you are currently using an investment professional, that firm that they work for will very likely have their own software calculator. And if you have a relationship with them, you absolutely should take a look at that and plug in those numbers and see where you stand. That will go miles and miles in helping you to understand your needs, where you are today, and where you want to be when you're ready to retire. So today, I have gone over quite a bit of information. I always like to provide for other resources. The Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, which is the agency that I work for, if you go to our website and go into the consumer portion, you will find publications that we have created. You will find links to publications that you can download from Kiplinger and the When I'm 65 website that has some really great publications on things like the When I'm 65 website, wi65.com. I think it's .com. They have great resources that are based upon where you are in your age. So it will tell you if you're just starting out. It will tell you if you are, if you're in the middle of your career, these are things that you should consider. And it will tell you all the way until you are facing retirement and wanting to make your retirement nest egg last. So that's an option. The other federal resources and other resources that I want to make sure that I mention is the SEC's consumer-facing webpage. It's investor.gov. They have some really great information for you to learn more about being prepared for retirement. And then the Kiplinger.com website that I mentioned previously has that great calculator. But in addition to that, they have some other really cool resources that you can download and take a look at. As I said, we've got 25 minutes really to sort of nail down to the topic and provide you with the resources, the information that you need. But like I said, I can talk for hours about this. So it's important that you take what I provide along with the additional resources in order to be prepared for, in this situation, for your retirement. So we go back to how much money do we actually need for retirement? Unfortunately, that number really is up to you and the retired lifestyle that you have envisioned. On average, most of us find that 80% is sort of that sweet spot. But depending on what your vision might be, 70 or 90% may be what is in order for you. I hope that this information has given you sort of that overview to help you understand the things that you need to start thinking about as you're getting closer to retirement. And the reality is, whether you're in your mid-20s or your mid-50s, we're all getting closer to retirement. So it's important that we start to think about these things when we can. So I just want to congratulate all of you, because exploring what you need in order to be able to retire is a fantastic first step to being prepared to do this. So many of us go into retirement without a clear understanding of what we're facing. And what happens is we either end up living this lifestyle where we're not spending any money because we are very concerned, or you end up at the opposite end of that and you travel and you do all the fun things that you always plan to do. But when you're done, the reality is that you're facing significant financial shortfalls. And that's the thing that we really want to avoid. So having these conversations where we talk about what we need and how we can make it last can go a really long way in ensuring that we're ready. So I do want to do a shameless plug. As you know, the Midweek Money Matters events are a weekly series where we are doing these 30-minute sessions. Next week is going to be another really great session on how we can make that nest egg last. We're going to talk about the 4% rule. We're going to talk about my favorite way of making that money last. It's called the bucket form. The bucket, it's the bucket thought process. We're also going to be talking a little bit about required minimum distributions. Those rules changed in 2019. So it used to be you had to be 70 and a half. Now it's changed to 72, but there's these ifs. And there have been some changes made because of COVID and the pandemic. So make sure that if you haven't already registered, make sure that you plan to join us next week for making your retirement last, making those investments last. I do want to tell you that our consumer services office is happy to help you answer questions you may have regarding the companies that we regulate. They are not allowed to give you any sort of investment advice. They can tell you whether or not your investment professional is registered. They can tell you if a product is registered. If you're looking at an investment that you're not quite sure about, our consumer services staff will be happy to help you figure out if they are registered within the Commonwealth. You don't want to invest with anyone who's not registered, and you certainly don't want to invest your hard-earned money into a product that's not legitimate. So make sure that you remember to call 800 PA Banks. Our friendly staff are available during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, between 8 and 5, and they're happy to answer your questions. One of the things that I think is fantastic about that office is that they are super friendly and they actually answer the call when someone calls in. Now, keep in mind that sometimes all of our staff are on the phone and you'll be asked to leave a message, but we do return calls pretty quickly. So I would encourage you to make sure that you remember that 800 PA Banks and make sure that you call with any questions or clarifications that you may be looking for. I do want to provide you with my contact information, and I want to thank you so much for being on today's call. My name is Katrina Boyer. My email address and telephone number are here for you to take note of. I am going to stop our recording before we go into the Q&A session of our presentation.